And so far, Vladimir Putin has yet to add Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to his calendar. Tillerson is now in Moscow. He landed a couple of hours ago. But as Russia declares relations between itself and the U.S. as, quote, the worst since the Cold War era, the two nations are in a tense squaring off over atrocities committed by the Assad regime in Syria. Meanwhile, according to human rights observers, today, Assad's army barrel-bombed a different rebel-held province of Hama. This is significant because the attack comes just one day after Press Secretary Sean Spicer warned that the use of barrel bombs in Syria would provoke additional U.S. response. Are we now on the brink of a multi-nation war? Let's go to Alex Vershbow. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Russia and former NATO deputy secretary. Ambassador, look, do you anticipate that Putin will refuse to shoehorn Secretary Tillerson into his apparently so busy schedule? And what then do we infer from that?
Well, right now it looks like he's not planning to see Secretary Tillerson. It's possible at the very last minute, based on what Foreign Minister Lavrov reports about their conversations, perhaps he'll relent at the last minute. But it just underscores that we have a very tense and difficult relationship with Russia on a whole range of issues. Syria is just the latest. The Russians are covering up for their client, for Bashar al-Assad. They claim that there is no evidence that he was responsible for the chemical weapons use. I know the U.S. is quite convinced by the intelligence that it was the regime, and now he's escalating his attacks. So how to persuade Putin that he's back in the wrong horse is a real challenge for Tillerson, but that's his mission.
Well,
and of course, he also has to talk about Ukraine. Russia's violating the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, so there's a lot of problems in the relationship.
President Trump had said through Sean Spicer that he's open to authorizing more strikes on Syria if Syria uses chemical weapons or barrel bombs. That was specifically referenced, and for people who don't know, barrel bombs are these unguided bombs that are barrel-shaped and filled with explosives and oil to make fire spread, shrapnel, sometimes chemicals for things like tear gas. If proven true, is the U.S. now on the hook to respond, considering the president said, I'm open to that?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. What is the administration policy on barrel bombs? I mean, they're terrible weapons. One could certainly argue that they're almost as ghastly in terms of how many people they kill and the way they do it as the chemical weapons. But I had the understanding last week that we were talking about chemical weapons as crossing a particularly significant red line, going back to World War I. And so I think we need to be a little bit clearer what will justify military action and what will not. We have a fundamental mission in Syria, which is to defeat ISIS in its big stronghold of Raqqa. So we have to weigh the consequences of escalating against the regime and, by extension, the Russians, which could interfere with our air campaign against Raqqa.
And this under the title, you know, what else is there? We have North Korea right now, major verbal saber-rattling. Kim Jong-un, the leader there, is now saying that he would wipe out America if provoked using nuclear weapons, and he would wipe us out without a trace. To what now do we look at when it comes to leadership in dealing with that, and will China be forced into involvement there?
Well, the North Koreans are pretty wild in their rhetoric. But at the same time, what the president did in Syria is a message to Kim Jong-un, to Iran, to other rogue states, that this president is prepared to use force. So they have to be a little bit more nervous when they go to bed at night. But at the same time, the real solution to the North Korean nuclear problem is China. They've consistently failed to put a lot of pressure, sufficient pressure, on the North Koreans to really force them to choose between having nuclear weapons or becoming a civilized state. But China bails them out. It helps them circumvent sanctions. So North Korea has a free ride. So that can't go on for much longer because they're developing missiles that are getting more and more capable, and they could reach American cities in a couple of years.
Well, something tells me Kim Jong-un doesn't win the prize for being a rational leader, so we shall see. It's good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Alex Vershbow is the former U.S. ambassador to Russia and, of course, at NATO.